some breaking news. This is a Fox News alert. We're following news out of Munster, Germany. That's where there are reports of at least 3 people killed and 20 wounded after a car crashes into a crowd.
And these are some of the very first pictures coming out of the area where the crash happened. They say in a very popular part of downtown. And here's where this story gets particularly interesting. The driver of this vehicle, according to police, killed himself after the crash. We now have a live picture from the ground there. You can see it is now coming up on late afternoon, 6 p.m. in Germany on what was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, 75 degrees outside in a city of about 300,000 people, where we're told this was a pretty popular pedestrian area, a pub area, where this car crashed into a crowd of people. And you can see people walking out, it would seem, from that inner containment zone. Police pretty relaxed in this live picture now. It appears as though they feel things are over, talking to some folks as they are heading out, although clearly on guard. You can see police with their rifles out as well there in Germany. Noon Eastern, 6 p.m. in Munster, Germany, where this story broke just about 2 hours ago. And with that, we welcome you to America's News Headquarters from Washington. I'm Leland Vittert, along with Elizabeth Brand.
Elizabeth Brand, thank you so much for joining us. Joining us now on the phone is Fox News national security and foreign affairs analyst, Dr. Waleed Phares. Thank you so much for joining us, Waleed. We're sort of breaking down this news as we get it, but there has been a string of incidents across Europe that we've seen like this, where we're seeing a man, or you could just say a driver driving into a crowd of people. I just want to get your reaction. Obviously, we're still getting a lot of these details as they come in.
Absolutely. Well, let me begin with what was mentioned already by Leland, which is the most important information we have that was released by the German police, is that the driver killed himself, according to the report that we see now on the wires. That is very important. It moves the incident from just an accident to a possibility of more than an accident. It's an incident, and if there was intention, we are already in the realm of a possible act of terrorism. Although we cannot confirm this, we're going to have the German authorities do so. In this framework, if this is the case, obviously using vehicles, vans, cars, and other types to create victims, to kill people in Europe for the past 2 years, of course there is a trend. And that's what I think the intelligence community now is focusing on, if indeed the fact that the driver killed himself is verifiable. Yeah,
kind of walk us through what's taking place right now. Obviously, we heard from a spokesperson for German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and she said our thoughts are with the victims and their families who were killed and injured in this incident, but we're not necessarily hearing authorities come out and say this was an act of terrorism. You gather that, you know, sort of from the fact that this perpetrator ended his life. But what's taking place right now? Because we're looking at some of these live pictures, it seems to be a fairly calm scene, all things considered.
True. But let's go back in time to the various incidents that took place across the continent, from Britain, France, and also Germany before that. Authorities are very cautious, are very slow, I would say, before making a statement, because they are relying on 2 things. One, the actual input coming from police and witnesses. It takes time. This is only a few hours. On the other hand, you also have the intelligence community assessing, combing through information, trying to see if there were threats, if there are threats, and the results will come to the prime minister or president or whomever is the head of the government, in this case the chancellor in Germany, and then they will make a political decision to announce it or not, or when to announce it, if it is terrorism.
Conceivably, if this person has killed himself, they know who this person is. They'll have a name. They'll begin going through their cell phones. They'll begin going through their social media accounts. They'll begin trying to figure out where this person came from. We're being told that it was indeed a van that plowed into this crowd, where they got the van. And as we've noted, Waleed, sort of in Europe, there has been a trend of these using vehicles as weapons, and they've been as sophisticated as the London Bridge attacks, where you had multiple assailants, and as unsophisticated but yet deadly as the Nice attack, where you had a guy just drive a lorry, what they call it over there, down the middle of a boulevard and kill dozens of people. From an intelligence standpoint, what is going to be the calculus of when to release more on what they know about this individual. Fair to say, though, that you put this fact pattern, a crowded pedestrian area in the middle of a sunny Saturday afternoon, van driven into crowd, multiple fatalities, and then the driver kills himself. That doesn't add up to an accident.
It's true, but governments have political considerations, have national security considerations, and have all sorts of other considerations. But at the end of the day, facts are the facts. I mean, this information will be released. For example, first element to examine thoroughly is the identity, the ID of the driver, alive or dead. This is going to be known. First of all, they'll go through his own information. Where does he live? What's his name? Is he a native German or immigrant? All that will be known very, very quickly. Second, they're going to go through the list that they have. So if he's somebody, a suspect who's on a list of suspects, Germany has a list of 10 to 12,000, what they call them, potential terrorist threats, people. Same in France. Thirdly, if he's not on that list, if the driver, male or female, is not on that list, then they're going to go through social media. So it's going to be a graduation of layers of information. But it's not going to take more than probably a few hours for the real information to come to government, maybe a couple more days to get more information from the intelligence service about the possibility of, you know, what has been said among the terrorist networks, websites, chatters, so on and so forth. So I would give it 24 hours to get a complete figure of who this person was.
You talk about giving it 24 hours, but I'm curious as to, and obviously if there were a threat at this particular location, authorities would sort of sound the alarm. I'm curious as to if this person, if this driver is part of a larger network. Is that something that we could hear about really rather sooner rather than later?
Let me begin with the last point, which is important. If he or she are, probably he in this case, that's what we've heard, is part of a network. Well, if that is the case, then it will be a very serious matter because you've got to examine who helped him, who got him the car, or from whom did he get the car, if he has been radicalized. But that is too far. Right. We need to have, the German authorities need to have a name and correspond that name to the list that they have and cross the line to state that this is terrorism. Then you're going to go in multiple directions. With regard to the city, yes, in intelligence and counterterrorism, you look at what's in the city. Are there military installations, NATO installations, any point of interest? But in this case, look, the target was soft. It was in the center, in downtown, as we understand, and therefore that would eliminate a lot of other hypotheses.
All right, Walid Faris, thank you so much for joining us last minute with this breaking news. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for more insight, let's bring in former CIA Covert Operations Officer Mike Baker. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Certainly, we're dissecting this information as it's coming in, and we're waiting on German officials to come out and say whether or not this was an accident or whether or not this was an act of terror. But certainly, with our own Jillian, who worked at the National Security Council for years, it appears like there is an uptick of chatter. And I'm curious as to sort of what's going on behind the scenes and what your sources are saying.
Yeah, well, look, it's typical for the German law enforcement, for the government there, and for others here in the EU to take their time in deciding, you know, when they pull that trigger and say it's a terrorist incident. So that's not a surprise that they're doing this. But look, this latest incident, it's the 1-year anniversary of the similar attack that took place in Stockholm that was perpetrated by Uzbek refugee who had his status denied. And, of course, we've had similar methodology used. Berlin Christmas market a little over a year ago, the incident in Nice. So the methodology, the timing, it all points to a terrorist attack. But, again, it's understandable. They're going to take their time to decide what's happening. Again, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, I don't think there's any doubt, really, at this point, you know, what it is.
When we talk about intelligence sharing at this point, because you made the reference to the attack a year ago in Stockholm, and we had Walid Faris on the show earlier, and he said, listen, this has been a 2-year really trend and uptick in using vehicles and vans as weapons. So what is going on right now between these intelligence agencies as they're sharing information to quickly dissect what took place and if there are possibly perpetrators who fled the scene?
Right. Well, the police are saying they don't believe there was anybody else involved at this point, as of minutes ago. So I don't know that there's any other effort out there going on right now. But what they are doing is obviously, and they've already done this. Frankly, they're just holding the information. They've basically peeled away all the layers of the perpetrator, of the individual who killed himself at the end of this attack. There's a great deal of intelligence sharing that goes on, as you pointed out, but there was nothing specific leading up to today's incident that pointed to the sort of specificity that would say today we've got to raise the alert, or this week we have to raise the alert. So yes, there's talk about this increased chatter, but just that of and by itself oftentimes isn't going to give you much other than this uncomfortable feeling that you've got something and you don't know where, you don't know what location. So it's important to understand that, well, we're seeing some more communication, or an increased amount of communication, but it's also important for people to understand that that doesn't mean that you're pinpointing a specific time and target location. But right now what's going on is look, the Germans unfortunately are very well versed in how to do these post-op reviews and all the forensic work that goes on to it. We have offered our support both from the intel community and the FBI, as have the Brits, who are extremely good at this sort of thing. So, EU comes together in incidents like this. There's been a lot of talk, of course, about, disparate views and Brexit and all the rest of it. But when you have an incident like this, that's when you see the intel and law enforcement communities over here in this part of the world really come together and work.
All right, Mike Baker, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, the story is very fresh. Authorities are working hard behind the scenes, and we're trying to work hard to get the information out to the people. So thank you so much, Mike. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.